Salt on the Porch, a coastal confession. I live on the edge of the Atlantic, where the mornings taste like metal and salt. Our cottage has a porch that collects sea spray the way old books collect dust, and a wooden barometer that never tells the truth. In summer, tourists walk the boardwalk with ice cream and loud shirts, as if weather could be charmed with color. In winter, the water takes on the blue of old bruises, and the gulls sound like arguments you can't win. When we moved here, my wife said the ocean would teach us patience. I believed her because she had a way of making every future sound reasonable, like a recipe you only had to follow. I learned the tides faster than I learned her silences. I learned the morning fishermen by their boats, the old man who whistled like a kettle, the way fog can hold the whole town in its mouth till noon. I learned that salt gets into everything: doors, hair, promises. If you are expecting a dramatic beginning, a storm, a confession written on the back of a grocery list, I will disappoint you. Betrayal does not enter a marriage like a thunderclap. It enters like damp, in corners, behind the piano, in the language of "I'm fine" and "it's nothing." I should have noticed when she took up morning runs without telling me why. I should have noticed when she stopped leaving rings in the soap dish. I should have noticed when her laughter got quieter in our living room and louder somewhere else I couldn't hear. The first proof had the courtesy to be ordinary, a receipt. It was pressed between the pages of a cookbook we used for weekends. Harbor chowder, lemon sole, recipes written by someone who believed food could rescue a day. The receipt was for 2 cappuccinos and a slice of almond cake from a cafe that opens before dawn when the boats go out. She was always leaving me little notes by limes, feed the cat, the plumber at 3, so. When I found the slip that said 5:47 a.m., I read it like a note she hadn't meant me to find. The second proof was a voicemail, accidental. Her voice in a windy place, the sound of gulls, a softened, "I'll call you later." Then a laugh cut short and a man saying something about the tide. There are people who can file such things under coincidence and continue. I am not one of them. The sea has trained my ear too well to ignore what repeats. It was the repetition that did it. The cafe, the dawn, the fact that her running shoes never smelled like sweat. His name was Eli. I learned it at the marina when I fixed the winch for a neighbor and overheard it tossed into the air like a ball. Everyone knew him, tall, the kind of tan that looks poured on, a laugh that sounded like he didn't owe anyone money. He taught beginners to sail and experts to forget why they were unhappy on land. He moved through the world like a boy who never got caught. I watched him tie a bowline one afternoon, fast as a good liar tells you the truth, and I felt something old in me pull taut. I did not follow them. Maybe I'm a coward. Maybe I was protecting the last version of our life that didn't hurt to remember. I went home and boiled pasta that softened into apology. When she walked in at dusk sunset doing that cheap magic with orange on the water, her cheeks were wind-burned, eyes salt-bright. She kissed me like she had a bus to catch. "You should come out on the water with me sometime," she said, carefully placing her keys in the bowl. "It helps." "Helps what?" I asked, but she was already checking the weather on her phone, the barometer on our wall swinging its little brass needle toward fair, because it had a sense of humor. It wasn't fair. Not the discovery, not the stillness that followed, not the catalog of tiny things I began to notice. The way she wore a sweater I'd never seen, the way she cut her hair so it wouldn't tangle in the wind, the way the cat preferred her pillow and looked at me like I'd misplaced something important. I confronted her on a Tuesday because I didn't want the weekend to be ruined by the answer. I had practiced the words until they tasted like driftwood. "Is there someone else?" I asked, the window letting in the kind of light that makes honest people look tired and liars look cinematic. She didn't lie, not in the way that counts. The truth arrived like a tide that had been on its way the whole time. She sat, palms flat on the table, as if bracing for weather. "There is," she said. "It wasn't supposed to be. I kept thinking I would tell you when it stopped. It didn't stop." In that moment I wanted thunder, or at least a train passing so I could hide the sound of myself. Instead, there was our terrible barometer and a kettle coming to boil. "How long?" I asked because I wanted a number I could shout at. "Months," she said. "I'm sorry." People imagine rage as the honest response, but it felt theatrical. I felt small and then suddenly vast. Like the moment you realize you're standing too close to the edge of something. I poured the tea. I stirred honey into hers with a spoon that made a small, obedient sound. We were a still life of a marriage ending. She moved out 2 weeks later because we decided it would be less cruel if endings were clean. She took her sweaters and left behind a small mountain of we that I had to sort into I and trash. Eli helped her. I know because the neighbor's boy said he saw them loading boxes into a truck with a rental company's name. He's strong, the boy added, as if I were collecting data. I stayed. Maybe because I loved the porch. Maybe because I didn't want to give up the way the sea sounds from the bedroom at 3 a.m, the white noise of a body big enough to forgive my smallness. Maybe because leaving would have made it look like they won a game I hadn't even wanted to play. The first weeks were a catalog of absurdities. 2 forks in the dishwasher, 2 towels that refused to dry on time, 2 identical mugs against a life that had become singular. I salted the steps so they wouldn't freeze, as if ice were my real enemy. I ignored the barometer and learned to read the sky. I walked the beach at dawn like a penitent, collecting sea glass and bargaining with waves. People in town developed that careful voice, the one we keep for funerals and toothaches. "You holding up?" they'd ask. "I'm afloat," I'd lie. Once I saw them, it was at the far end of the beach where the dunes make private rooms out of sand and grass. They were walking with the lazy rhythm of people who believe the afternoon is theirs. He said something that made her stop. He tucked hair behind her ear, a gesture too intimate for the wind. I didn't walk toward them. What was I going to do? Interrupt happiness like a weatherman. I turned around and counted my footsteps back to the cottage, telling myself each was a mile. The house noticed before I did that I was becoming someone else. I started fixing things I had ignored for years. The loose stair, the screen door that screamed, the paint flaking like a sunburn. Mending is its own kind of prayer. I found the old wooden skiff under the porch, more memory than boat, and began to restore it. The manual I ordered from a stranger smelled like oil and patience. I sanded until I understood grain the way some men understand scripture. I sealed cracks with the hard truth of epoxy. Under my hands, the skiff remembered it was meant to float. The sea watched, neutral and enormous. I also learned to swim at dawn. Properly, not the romantic splash you see in movies. Best advice I got was from a woman twice my age who swims every morning year-round. "Respect the cold and exhale into it," she said, handing me earplugs and a smile that had nothing to prove. The first time, the water shoved the breath out of me like a bully. The second time, we negotiated. By the 5th, I understood that some pain is a gate you pass through to arrive somewhere cleaner. And because I am not a hero in a quiet book, I joined the volunteer coastal rescue. Thursday nights, we met in the back room of the harbor office, half maps and half stale coffee. We practiced knots and first aid and the choreography of people who have to move in the same direction quickly. The first call I went on was a paddleboarder who didn't read the wind correctly and drifted past the pier, waving like a lost flag. The relief in his face when we pulled him aboard made something uncoil in my chest. The town noticed me becoming the man you call when the weather turns. The grocer asked for help when a storm broke his awning. The cafe owner pressed an extra cinnamon roll into my palm at dawn like a benediction. The neighbor's boy brought me a broken kite and left with a working one and the kind of grin that counts as currency. In other words, the large space that used to be my marriage filled with 100 small human threads. They held. None of this made their affair noble or forgivable. It did not erase the image of him tucking her hair, or the polite way she placed her ring on the windowsill before leaving like someone tidying an Airbnb. But it built a life I could stand barefoot inside. Of course there were storms, one in particular. July, heat heavy enough to make men stupid. The barometer, finally useful, fell as if it had been shot. We battened the town like an old ship. Plywood, sandbags, tar that made the whole place smell like summer on a highway. By evening, wind began to write its fast handwriting across the dune grass. At midnight, the power went out, which made the storm feel more intimate, as if it had licked its finger and extinguished our candles one by one. The call came at 1:12 a.m. A small sailboat hadn't returned. 2 souls aboard, last seen near the inlet. I knew the area like I know the exact moment coffee is drinkable. We launched the rescue RIB into black water, thick with thrown rain. The ocean in a storm has a personality you hope never to meet. It makes you feel younger and older at once. Young enough to be scolded, old enough to understand you are not in charge. We found them by the lighthouse, which was trying to teach the night manners. The boat was half swamped, the mast a broken finger pointing at nothing. One of the life jackets was orange. The other was red. The man with the red jacket was Eli. There is a joke the universe tells and then waits to see if you're good at not laughing. He wasn't laughing. He was hypothermic, eyes glass bright and chattering nonsense about a rope that parted. The woman with him, tourist, terrified, mascara proving that waterproof is a lie, clung to our gunnel like she decided she believed in us at the last possible moment. Training is a beautiful thing. It overrules the part of you that wants to become a narrator. We hauled them aboard. We covered them with blankets, hot packs like secret suns against their ribs. We had room for 3, not 4, so we clipped the stricken boat and towed her, arrogant and broken, like a dog who refuses the leash. Only when the shoreline began to shape itself out of black and white did I let my eyes study the man across from me. He recognized me second. First, he recognized the idea of warmth. Then he placed my face and failed to find the correct words. You, he said, not with triumph, not with shame, but with the astonishment of someone meeting the consequences of choices in an unexpected uniform. There was a moment, 2 heartbeats, maybe 3, where the worst version of me wanted to offer him nothing. It's amazing how quickly pettiness can put on moral arguments like a costume, but the better version had a job. I poured warm water into a paper cup and held it until his hands stopped being claws and became hands again. Sip, I said, because the body can only forgive in small quantities. We brought them in. The lighthouse swept its slow blessing back and forth. On the dock, my town waited with blankets and questions, and the kind of gratitude that embarrasses everyone. Eli looked at me and tried to say something complicated with 1 syllable. I shook my head once, not to refuse it, just to say, not now. The storm cleaned the streets the way a hard conversation cleans a room. In the morning, we picked up branches, righted trash cans, laughed because we were tired and the worst had not come. I went home, salt dried in my eyebrows like frost. I slept on the couch with the windows open a crack because the house breathes better if you let it. When I woke, there was a note taped to my door. It was from Eli, 5 words only. Thank you for my life. No signature. His handwriting was neat, vowels obedient. I stood with the paper in my hand and felt something precise come loose in me. The knot that says pain must be hoarded to prove it existed. It doesn't. The proof is the man who wrote the note and the woman who will text him later and the town that will gossip and forget and remember and forget again. A week later, my wife knocked on my door. Former wife, if you like legalities. The divorce had moved through the courts with the bureaucratic grace of a slow elevator. She stood on the porch with a carton of strawberries as if bringing an apology to a picnic. We hadn't spoken since the storm. I heard, she said. You hear most things, I said, because when love leaves, humor is what we have left that proves we were paying attention. I'm glad you were there, she said. And I saw the real grammar in her sentence. You were there. For a year I had felt invisible in our marriage. It turns out I had simply been standing in the wrong place. She looked thinner in the way busy people do. She was wearing a sweater I remembered, and a softness I didn't. Come in, I said, because hospitality is cheaper than bitterness and more filling. We ate the strawberries at the old table, the barometer pointing at change. We didn't rehearse the past. The past does not improve with repetition. She apologized without theater. I said I had become a man I almost recognized, and that was not entirely her fault. We talked about her job, my rescue work, the cat, who has always believed we belonged to her rather than the other way around. When she left, she stood for a long time with her hand on the doorknob, a position I now recognize as a genre. People about to admit something to themselves. I loved you, she said. I loved you, I said. The tense mattered. And now? She asked as if an exam were being graded. Now I wish you well, I said. And I meant it with the kind of sincerity that makes an evening lighter. She nodded like someone given a map with only the road she needs. After she left, I carried the strawberries to the porch and salted the steps for no good reason except the pleasure of the little white fan they make on wood. The tide was on its way out, dragging its skirts like an actress exiting. The cottage held itself upright the way old bodies do, with dignity and a few tricks. I am supposed to tell you how it ends. Here's the truth. It ends the way honest weather does, with a front moving through, a pressure change you can feel in your teeth, a sky that doesn't apologize for being itself. The divorce was finalized on a clear day in September. Paperwork is never poetic, but it does allow for ceremony if you design one. I took our rings, the one I had taken off, in the kind of fury that chips it, the one she had placed on the windowsill like a question, and walked to the end of the rebuilt skiff's dock. I tied them to a piece of line, simple knot, and lowered them into the water until they touched the skin of the sea without breaking it. Then I pulled them back up, dried them, and put them in a small cedar box I made with my own hands. I will not throw them away. They are evidence that I tried. They are evidence that something was once true. I keep the cottage. I keep the porch and the barometer that still lies to me with charm. I swim at dawn and rescue fools and good people and tourists with poor judgment. I rebuilt the skiff and now take kids from the town out at sunset to show them how a gull can hover without asking for permission. On Tuesdays, I read at the library to children who like pirates and to adults who pretend they don't. On Fridays, the cafe knows my order before I do. Sometimes I see Eli and my ex-wife walking on the beach. Sometimes I don't. When I do, we nod. We are not friends, though there is a species of friendliness that grows out of disasters survived in the same geography. He leaves me alone on the water. I leave him the land. Do I forgive her? That's not the correct verb. Forgiveness suggests an accounting I no longer wish to keep. What I have is this. I do not want her to suffer. I do not want to carry the version of myself who needed her to. The sea taught me this. What you throw into it, it hands back, altered but still yours. I started writing a small column for the town paper, Salt on the Porch. It's about weather and kindness and how to fix a hinge without losing your temper. People read it because it's short and it tells the truth about small things. In one of them I wrote, "Love is not a harbor that keeps you from all storms. It's a learning of boats." The editor said it sounded like a poem. I said it sounded like my life. There is a woman who swims at dawn, the one with the earplugs and the advice. Her name is Anna. For months our exchange was practical. Water temperature, jellyfish sightings, the best way to warm your hands without scalding them. One morning in late October, when the light arrived reluctantly and the wind decided mercy was fashionable, she handed me a thermos. "Ginger tea," she said. "It forgives the cold faster than you do." We drank on the beach while the sun argued with clouds. She told me about her son, who lives far away and builds houses that sit politely in trees. I told her about the rescue nights and the barometer in the cedar box. She listened the way tide pools listen, not to collect, but to understand. If you are waiting for me to say I fell in love, you will have to keep reading my column. I can tell you this. I have begun to like the space on the porch where another pair of shoes could be. I have learned the pleasure of cooking enough for two and saving half because future me is a friend. I have discovered that some days, hope has the texture of toast and butter, and other days it arrives like a gull's shadow, quick, startling, instructive. The ending is not a boat disappearing over the horizon. The ending is me on the porch, salt blooming on the rail, the cat deciding my lap is a sensible country. The phone is quiet. The sea is not. The town breathes in and out like a creature I trust. I can hear the barometer lying behind me and the kettle negotiating with heat. I do what the ocean taught me on the first day we arrived. I watch, I wait, I let the water decide the shape of the shore, and then I build my life a few careful feet above the highest tide. If you need a sentence to walk away with, take this one. I loved a woman who left, and I did not drown. I learned to read the sky and to throw a line to a stranger in the dark. I learned that endings are not cruel if you refuse to make them smaller than they are. I keep the cottage and my good work in the habit of rising before the gulls. The porch gathers salt. The door stays open when the air is kind. And on mornings when the sea shines like a promise it can keep, I take the skiff out and thank the water for delivering me to a shore I didn't know I deserved. If this story touched you, please take a moment to support the channel. Hit the like button. It helps more people find stories like this. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful emotional confessions every week. Your support truly means the world to me.